Hello, this is Hollisa Alewine. Welcome back to our continuing study in the 7 Abominations of the Wicked Lamp. And as you know, if you followed us this far through these programs, we have now opened the 7th seal of Revelation. So why do I look so happy? Well, it's by the time you get to the 7th seal, for the righteous, you're truly entering into your Sukkot. You're entering into your Shabbat. And you see that when they open the 7th seal, when the Lamb opens the 7th seal, a stillness reigns in heaven with that seal being broken open. All the beloved of Adonai are celebrating peace on Shabbat like they always do. And finally, we can see what's the point of celebrating Shabbat every week. Well, we will see the point. And what's happening here, remember we assigned Hebrew letters for each of the 7 seals, and we can do the same with the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls, the 7 angels, and so forth. Because each Hebrew letter has an essence, a meaning assigned to it that kind of gives you the theme or the overview of what's going to be going on within that particular seal. And so when we come to the 7th seal, we've gone Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav. Now we're on Zayin. Zayin. Now it's not the same as Zion. All right, that's a different word. Zayin. Zayin. If you can say that, then you have the basis for some wonderful understanding. Because even though Zayin can be seen as a weapon, like a knife or something, there's another definition of Zayin entirely that's going to make perfect sense when this silence reigns in heaven with the opening of the Zayin seal. Because what's happening at that point is the righteous among the nations, they have been gathered, and now they are about to be nourished and watered as one flock. If you remember, we talked about the footsteps of Messiah and how the righteous they would begin to gather in flocks in the wilderness, and that's plural. But at some point, Yeshua says they're going to become one flock with one shepherd. And we know that shepherd is Yeshua. And what does a shepherd do? He waters his flock, and he nourishes his flock because he is the good shepherd. And so there's a very, I don't know if it's very mysterious. The more you do Shabbat, the less mysterious it seems. But there is a relationship of peaceful nourishment on Shabbat, and you see it as well at Sukkot. You know, if you like to eat, Sukkot's for you. The feasting that goes on Shabbat, and the feeling of peace, and that the world has been pushed away, and that you're in this special place, that you've actually entered into the kingdom already. And you can find it, you know, there's a maturity that takes place at Yom Kippur. There's a maturity of Sukkot, because what's happened by that time, it kind of goes back to our understanding of the 7 spirits of Adonai. When we study them, because remember, you've got wisdom, understanding. Everybody has a measure of wisdom, right? It's information. It's backward from what we learned in English. We always learned that knowledge is the information and wisdom is knowing how to use it. In Hebrew, it's opposite. Wisdom, everybody has a measure of wisdom, all right? It's not that rare. Understanding, all right, you acquire more skill in the wisdom, counsel, application to go with the wisdom. Here, the Ruach Adonai, that's going to have to do with authority and knowing how to use that wisdom under authority and how to use that wisdom with authority. This brings you all the way over here to the Feast of Trumpets and then to Yom Kippur. So what you have here in the middle is a growing in maturity. Like this wisdom has grown to this point, and now you know how to apply it in a living way. Remember, the first living creatures with a breath of life, they appear in the earth on the 5th day. And then by the 6th day, you have the beast and the man. And so the man within the man is the woman. They are one. Even though they are two, they are one. There's a sacrificial love that has to take place in order to separate the woman out of the man's side. It's going to cost him flesh and bone. And so it's a sacrificial love that is associated with the spirit of knowledge, which is the sixth spirit. It's called da'at. So you can see how knowing somebody is different just having the information about them, the wisdom, or the understanding about them. Now you have loved and known this person sacrificially. And in some sense, it's going to bear fruit, because when Adam knew his wife, when he experienced her entirely, then they conceived a child. And so knowledge is a very mature part of the seven spirits of Adonai. And once you've attained that maturity of unity, that's when you can truly rest and be nourished at Sukkot. Because that's what happens with the bridegroom, is he is going to have to love his bride sacrificially, which we know Yeshua did. And when he loves her sacrificially, there is a peaceful reverence. The bride enters into the reverence for her husband that Peter talks about. So with the reverence of Adonai, you can see how that easily applies in a marriage, and why that's a great, picture that we have of our relationship with Yeshua. And so by the time we get to this Zion seal, or the seventh seal, the bride of Messiah has now entered into a true unity with her bridegroom. She's acknowledging that everything is supplied by his hand at this point. Her wilderness experience taught her that he will supply her daily bread. He will supply her water. He will supply everything she needs for her spiritual life. He will tell her when it's safe and when it's time to move and when she needs to be still. And so you've got the bride and the bridegroom, completely inspired of the Holy Spirit, working in subjection to the Holy Spirit, and therefore there is peace and shalom. There's a perfection that is achieved here with the Zion seal for the righteous. And we see this loving reciprocation. Nobody's keeping score in this marriage. We are all giving everything we have to one another. And there's a real completeness in the testimony of the righteous with this Zion seal when it opens up for them. And I think Paul writes about it to the Ephesians in Ephesians 5:28. He says, husbands also ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. That goes back to day 6. His wife was his own body on day 6. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it. The key word there is nourish. He nourishes and cherishes it, just as Messiah also does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Messiah and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you also is to love his own wife, even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects or reverences her husband. And that's the seventh spirit of Adonai. It's the spirit of reverence. The sixth spirit is da'at. It's sacrificial love. And that's exactly what Paul is describing to the Ephesians, that the husband, the bridegroom, loves his wife sacrificially. He nourishes her. He cherishes her. And she, in turn, reverences him. And of course, that just restarts and closes the circle, because remember, reverence is the beginning of all wisdom, right? So, but even as we get into Revelation, those patterns don't really change, because if we look at the sixth assembly, right, Philadelphia, we know that means brotherly love. It's a sacrificial love. They say there's no greater love than a man lay down his life for his friend, for his brother. And that shows us how at Yom HaKippurim, when we are sealed, when the gates are closed, how protected we are. even as a great tribulation is going on, we are sealed with the sixth seal, and then all we have to do is stand still and see Yeshua and the Zion seal and the Shabbat of our journey as believers. And, it's the seal on the clay. If you think of what a seal looks like, as you push the seal in there into the clay, you're forcing part of the clay in, but it also forces part of the clay to stand out or stand forth, like Job prophesied. And so there's a chatam, there is a seal that at the very same time it's sealing up the righteous for a great Shabbat and a great Sukkot, it's also forcing, through this mark on the seal, it's forcing out another part of the seal. As one is pressed in, another stands out. And so, in a sense, that seventh abomination, which is separation of brothers, well, they're brothers, right? So there's a flock here that has achieved unity. But among those flocks, we know, again, it goes back to Mystery Babylon and how she has clung to her citizenship with Babylon or Egypt or Rome or whoever. It's during the tribulation that this is going to stand forth. It's going to be made evident. There's the seal separates this from that which is in with that which is out. And so those who stand out from the righteous are going to be those who were willing to separate from brothers, or to separate brothers, or to maintain the separation of brothers. And maybe this is why Philadelphia is the sixth assembly. It's kind of whispering to us brotherly love. It's talking about the unity of the faith that Paul is talking about, showing us how it applies to the body of Messiah, using the marriage as an example. So with Yom Kippur, we'll come into unity as one nation, one flock, and then we'll be gathered in with the protection of that seal, while with the opening of the seal, those who have separated, they will be made known. It's the sound of the Moedim trumpets. If we think of what's going to come after this, there's going to be 7 trumpets. We know that the trumpets had to be blown over the feast days, over the Moedim. And so what do the trumpets do? They make those feast days stand out. They make them stand forth. I know a lot of people are running around blowing shofars every other breath, and that's fine. But for the sake of understanding why there's 7 trumpets in Revelation, you have to understand that, in the Jewish community, they don't blow shofars in such a manner. There are specific times that they are blown. The specifically mandated times that the shofar would be blown are the feast days. There's particular feast days that they're blown over, and they're blown over the new moons. And so when you hear the sound of the shofar, you know its significance. You know it's a time of a feast, that these feasts are also eternal witnesses. They have been from the time that the Torah was given. And so it's kind of strengthening your link when you hear the sound of the trumpet, when you hear the sound of the shofar for one of these feasts. Really, it's connecting you with the believers of the ages, those who have gathered at the Moedim, from time immemorial, and you understand that it's time to go through the gates of life in Jerusalem. It's a time of trouble out there, yes, but you are being drawn in to the gates of Jerusalem in the holy city. You're coming through the gates of life. And so who comes through this seal in such a way that they are drawn to those trumpets and drawn by those trumpets? Again, it's the unity of the faith. It's that seal of love with the 6th seal that you pass through in order to reach the 7th seal and that gathering and that silence of Shabbat and Sukkot. It's a sacrificial love that nourishes and cherishes the body of Messiah. Remember the parables that Yeshua taught about brothers beating up brothers, people beating up one another who were no better than one another, who were not above one another in the kingdom. Servant, servant. There's no reason to beat up a fellow servant. Sometimes there has to be justice, there has to be discipline, but if there's one thing we learned about the Torah, it's never supposed to be excessive. You need to leave that door open for repentance and, again, the regathering of the saints. But Yom Kippur is truly the love of the Creator. It's a sacrificial love of the Creator. And we can feel that love on Yom HaKippurim. We'll go without bread. We will fast physical bread in order to feast on His spiritual bread, to come into the unity with His Spirit, not just with Him, but with our brothers and sisters. You know, that's a testimony in itself. So now we've attained the seventh seal. We've gone into the Zion seal. And now we've reached the number that is repeated all throughout Revelation. And again, people think 666 is the big number of Revelation. It's not. It's minor. At least to the righteous, it's a minor thing because there's no chance you're going to be concerned about the mark of the beast. It's just not you. You're not the red one. You are not Rome. You are not dwelling with Babylon. Now, if you are dwelling with Babylon, maybe it's a consideration. But the message of Jeremiah is it's possible to dwell in Babylon without dwelling on Babylon, if that makes sense. If you dwell on Babylon, then you are depending upon it, all its systems. Your faith is in its systems, not in the Holy One. And so you might miss that call. But if you're just dwelling in Babylon, but you're not of Babylon, you're not on Babylon, you're praying for its prosperity and for its peace, because its peace will be your peace, but you are listening for the call home because you have true citizenship in the kingdom of heaven, and you don't confuse the two. So we've arrived here at the seventh seal. That's suggesting to us we've come to the end of creation as we know it. Everything you've known about the creation up to that point is about to change. There is about to be a completion of the creation as we know it. Because remember, 7 is the number of completion. Everything's going to be sealed up here. And whatever happens next, it talks about a new heaven and a new earth. I suggest that because, Chadash in Hebrew, it doesn't mean brand new, it means renewed. It's a fresh start, just like the moon. It's not a different moon you see every month. It's just a renewed moon. It's a renewed heaven, a renewed earth. He's going to wipe away all the systems and evil things that have been built here. I don't think He builds on top of stupid. And there's a whole lot of stupid in the earth right now. I don't think He wants to build on top of any of those commercial systems, medical systems, government systems, military systems. I think He wipes all that out. And it's fresh and it's new. He doesn't need to build on top of anybody's anything. And so don't be surprised as all these things are just wiped off the table at the time of Messiah and everything becomes new. Once that time is fulfilled, we start a new day. Something fresh. So here's the significance of the letter Zayin and the number 7, right? Because remember, Zayin is the 7th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, right here. So again, you can look this up in your Strongs or wherever, and you can see that Zayin is typically referenced as a weapon. And of course, the sword of judgment, that is a theme in Revelation. We're not diminishing the fact that there is a sword about to go out there. Outside of heaven, right? The righteous have been gathered. And outside of that gathering, there's some bad stuff going on. We don't want to diminish the role of the Zayin as a weapon here. But for the righteous, remember, there's silence in heaven for about half an hour. We're about to have Sukkot here. I mean, serious Sukkot. And so Zan, which is a 2-letter root of Zayin, it can mean sustenance, and it can mean nourishment. Sustenance and nourishment. That's why I read that passage about how no man hates his own flesh, but he nourishes it and he cherishes it. What's happening? Messiah has gathered us in here at the sixth seal, and now he is going to nourish us and to cherish us. Very different than what's happening with the sword of the Zayin, is the nourishment of the Zan. And so in Hebrew, there is a blessing called the birchat, the blessing, hazan. All right, it's the blessing after the meals, and it's the blessing for nourishment. It's being thankful for nourishment. It's the first blessing after meals on Shabbat. You do this especially on Shabbat today, so it corresponds here to this seventh seal, or the Zayin seal. It's based on Psalm 113, verse 2, Psalm 136, verse 25, and Psalm 145, verse 16. And again, this is done every Shabbat after the meal. And here's how it goes. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who in his goodness provides sustenance for the entire world with grace, with kindness, and with mercy. He gives food to all flesh, for his kindness is everlasting. Do you hear the nourishment that he's talking about with the Zan? In just a minute, I'm going to do it where you can actually hear me say the word Zan as it appears in the blessing. Through his great goodness to us, continuously, we do not lack food. Remember the bread from heaven. Yeshua said, I am the bread of heaven. We are never going to lack. We do not lack food. And may we never lack food for the sake of his great name. For he, benevolent God, provides nourishment and sustenance for all, does good to all, and prepares food for all his creatures whom he has created. As it is said, you open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. Blessed are you, Lord, who provides food for all. Right, so this kind of takes us back to the garden. He gave us everything we needed in the garden. He gave us everything we needed for nourishment, for food, and not just us, but the creatures too. It says he gave them, the plants, also to sustain them. This is a beautiful blessing. You open your hand and you satisfy the desire of every living thing. He sustains the living. And then we provide an acknowledgement. It's you, Lord, who provide food for all. It's not through our own power. We can't make a grain of wheat grow. We can't make a leaf of spinach grow. That's the illusion, that if we put the seed in the ground, it'll come up regardless. Well, it won't. It comes up because he provides food for us. And at any point he decides he does not want to provide food for us, that wheat will not come up, or it will wither through famine, through drought. That spinach will not come up. Some of us might be happy that it didn't come up. Actually, I like spinach. It's Brussels sprouts. I don't really mind if that doesn't come up. At any rate, he makes things grow. And he kind of reminds us of that in the Shemitah year. So we can see in a very vivid way how things will grow without our interference. But what I would like for you to hear, I want to do this in Hebrew so that you can hear the Zan. I want you to listen really close, because when you hear Zan, you're hearing about the nourishment of the Zayin seal, the nourishment of the righteous. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of the blessings that we sing when we gather there at the opening of the Zayin seal. And so I'll try to slow way down. I hate singing in public, but I'm going to do it for you. And I'll try to slow down because I want you to hear that word in its Hebrew context. You just can't tell from an English translation. It doesn't have the same impact. But if you can hear Zan in the Hebrew, then you will have a context for what we're talking about when we talk about the Zayin seal and how this is a time when Messiah nourishes and cherishes his bride. And it goes, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hazan et haolam kulo betuvo, bechen bechesed urachamim. Hu noten lechem lechol basar, ki leolam chasdo, uvtuvo hagadol, tamid lo chasar lanu, ve'al yachsar lanu, mazon leolam ba'ed, bavur shemo hagadol, ki hu el zanum farnes lakol, umetiv lakol, umechin mazon, lecho briotav asher bara, baruch atah Adonai, hazan et hakol. Amen. So you could hear repetitiously the Zan. That's how often thankfulness is being offered on Shabbat in just one blessing. There's way more blessings than this for the blessing after meal. But in this first blessing, it's like Zan, Zan, Hamazon, Zan, Zan. Because as you're going through those blessings, it should be a reminder of where you want to be when that Zayin seal is opened. You want to be nourished and cherished by Messiah. You want to be in unity with him. And so you acknowledge with that particular blessing that he does have the ability to sustain us. Not just us, he has the ability to sustain all creation with nourishment because he created everything. See, that's what the beast doesn't want to admit. The beast wants you to think that you can create your own truth. You can be like God. And then eventually, you are God. That's not true. These blessings remind us who the Creator is, that we are the created. And so this Zan, the Shoresh of Zayin Zan, it's used in Psalm 144:13, and in that particular context, it means like from kind to kind, like all sorts or all kinds of things, not just nourishment, but it means all kinds of things, of various sorts of things. That says, let our garners be full, furnishing every kind of produce, and our flocks bring forth thousands and 10,000s in our fields. Well, you know what? That's awesome, because it tells us that those flocks that were brought out into the wilderness to preserve truth among those flocks, and then Yeshua is going to come and take all those flocks and make them into one flock, that they are going to be of various kinds. We're going to be very diverse. I mean, you want to talk about diversity? This is what Scripture's teaching. There is going to be a diversity of produce, a diversity within this one flock. As he pulls in all these different flocks, it's going to be one flock. Another place where it's used is 2 Chronicles 16:14. It says, the resting place which he had filled with spices of various kinds, blended by the perfumer's art. So the idea here is you take various kinds of things, in this case spices, to make a beautiful perfume. Because all these different scents, even the bitterness of myrrh, it may smell awful by itself, but you mix it with other spices and it smells beautiful. The flocks, they're all different colors. Remember Jacob's multicolored flocks? They're all different colors, but you put them all together and they're just one beautiful flock. And so the idea of opening this Zayin seal, and we just had a picture of every nation, tribe, and tongue. It was various kinds of people, various kinds of spices. He's brought those fragrances into his presence so that he can enjoy the diversity that he has created, and we worship him for it.